The sun rose over Camoro like a punishment. It did not warm, it seared. The village sprawled along the edge of a broken plateau where wind never cooled and the land itself groaned under each new day. Cracks split the ground like jagged mouths, and the sand shimmered with mirages that never delivered relief. Children played barefoot only until noon. After that, even the soil had teeth. Anya walked through it silently. At 16, she moved like dust on wind, there, and then gone, never disturbing the world around her. Her feet made no sound, not even when she ran. And when she ran, it was not out of joy, but out of obedience, always toward a new chore shouted from across the compound. The neighbors called her the girl who never echoed. To her uncle, she was simply another mouth to feed, barely. She lived in the back corner of the house, behind the broken clay jars and sacks of maize, where spiders nested and no one bothered to look. Her bed was a worn reed mat, her blanket a threadbare shawl that still smelled faintly of her mother, though her mother had vanished 3 seasons ago. Vanished. Not buried. Not mourned. Just, taken by something in the wind, her father days after. The villagers never spoke openly of it. But the women, when grinding millet or weaving baskets, sometimes leaned toward one another and whispered with half-lowered eyes. Her mother walked too far into the dunes. Her father heard voices in the well. She is earth-touched. You can see it in her steps. When Anio passed, they quieted. She bore it all without protest. She had learned young that words made you a target. Silence made you invisible. But still, they found her. Especially Ndari. Her cousin was 2 years older and 3 times louder. Ndari's laughter bounced off the clay walls like a song everyone wished would end. Her feet were always adorned with bangles, her wrists clinked with brass. She painted her lips with red ochre and tied colorful scarves around her head, declaring herself the future wife of a chief, even if none had come to ask. Anio, fetch my water, unless you're too dainty for the bucket. Anio, did your silence steal your brain, too? Anio, maybe if you scream, the ground will finally eat you. The last one was said with a giggle, but Anio never smiled. She simply took the water jar and walked away, barefoot, letting her silence carry her through the heat. But inside, she felt things she had no words for. There was a pressure in her chest, something she couldn't give to anyone, not the aunt who refused to meet her eyes, not the grandmother who had stopped speaking the day her daughter vanished. Not the gods, who only answered louder mouths. At night, Anio lay awake and imagined walking away from the house, the village, the world that expected her to shrink smaller each day. She imagined walking deep into the desert, past the dunes where no one dared tread, where the wind howled with ancient voices. She imagined the sand swallowing her, not in death, but in transformation. That out there, beyond the bones of the land, something waited to unbury her. But she always woke to another day of heat and silence. The only ones who didn't fear her footsteps were the village children, too young to understand caution. They followed her sometimes, curious why the ground didn't crunch beneath her toes, why dust didn't rise. One small boy once asked, "Do you float?" She had almost laughed. Almost. But instead, she bent down and pressed her palm to the hot ground. She didn't speak, but in her mind, she asked it something, anything. Maybe just, why me? The ground was silent. Or maybe not. Once, a toothless elder named Mama Sarai stopped Anio by the market fence. Her eyes were glazed with cataract haze, but her voice was sharp. "You keep holding it in," the old woman said. "That scream. You hold it like a basket of fire. But listen, child. If you ever let it out," she leaned closer, her breath dry like bones. "If you ever scream, the ground will crack. And the village will remember what they buried." Anio said nothing. She only nodded and walked away, even as her skin bristled with something close to knowing. She didn't know what they had buried. But she knew this, she would not break for them. Not yet. And still, her footsteps made no sound. The festival of the 3 suns came once a year, and with it came the promise of blessings for Camoro. It was the only day the entire village dressed in color, yellows for sun, blues for rain, and reds for fire. The elders chanted, the children danced, and even the most bitter hearts softened under the sprawling shade of the sacred baobab that had stood longer than memory. That morning, Anio rose earlier than the birds. She was tasked with sweeping the shrine that lay in the roots of the baobab, a sunken circle lined with white stones and offerings from past generations. Her aunt barked the command without looking at her, tossing her a cracked broom of stiff palm leaves. She worked in silence, as always. Bent low, careful not to disturb the ancestral objects, she brushed away leaves, scorpions, and stray bones of small animals that had crawled in to die. In the center of the circle, nestled in a carved indentation, sat the karu stone, a thumb-sized piece of black glass said to carry the blessing of fertility, protection, and judgment. It was always warm to the touch, never dusty, never stolen. Anio didn't touch it. She swept around it, then bowed her head and left without a sound. By midday, the shrine was filled with villagers laying their gifts, calabashes of honey, coins, feathers, woven charms. The women ululated. The drummers played louder. The elders lit incense of ground bark and goat fat, the thick smoke curling around the baobab's trunk. Then the shouting began. Someone had gone to place their offering, and found the center of the shrine empty. The karu stone was gone. Gasps. Screams. Confusion. Then, suspicion. The first to speak was Nari. She was alone with it, she said, raising one painted hand. She swept it this morning. Ask her. Heads turned. Voices rose. It happened too fast. Anio? She always walks strange. Always quiet. Like a thief. She has no parents. Who keeps her in check? She's earth-touched. I said this before. She doesn't speak because she's hiding something. They dragged her before the elders. Not with force, not yet, but with expectation. With words that stung more than hands. Her uncle stepped forward, lips tight, expression unreadable. Is it true? He asked. Were you the last to see the stone? Anio stood still, heart thudding like a distant drum. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. Her throat closed, thick with fear. Not fear of the punishment. Fear of the eyes. The weight of them. The certainty that whatever she said, it wouldn't matter. She didn't speak. The old women who once whispered of her now stared as if she had poisoned their children. The same children she had carried on her back, led away from thorn bushes, fed from her own bowl. None of it mattered. Dari crossed her arms with satisfaction. She took it. Or gave it to someone. Either way, she's unclean now. The baobab won't stand for it. Anio shook her head, faintly. A murmur of defiance. But still, no words. Then, from behind the ring of people, a cane struck the ground. The old seer of Kamoro, Babayu, shuffled forward. Skin like dry riverbed, eyes like hollow wells. He leaned on his staff of twisted wood and raised one bony finger. Let the ground speak for her, he said. Silence followed. If she is guilty, the earth will curse her. But if she is innocent, it will rise to protect her. That is the law older than any of us. Some nodded. Others scoffed. But they waited. They watched. Babayu tapped the center of the shrine with his staff. Speak, girl. But Anio couldn't. Not because she was guilty, but because her voice had withered under years of never being believed. Her uncle gave one final look. Then he said it. Drag her. The air cracked like a whip. Hands grabbed her arms. A rope was looped hastily around her hair, yanked backward until she stumbled. Her scalp screamed before she did. The children watching began to cry. Her feet skidded against the stone ring of the shrine, then onto the gravel path that stretched into the heat. Her body dragged like discarded cloth, skin tearing on jagged stones, elbows scraping open, dust filling her mouth. She tried to reach backward, to stop it, to lift herself, but every tug of the rope sent fire through her skull. Still, she didn't scream. Her lips trembled. Her eyes bled tears. But no sound. The village watched. Some turned away. Most did not. Dari watched too, a grin playing on her lips. Then, something no one expected happened. The sacred baobab, whose roots had held generations of prayers and offerings, shivered. Its tallest branch, one that had stretched high like a finger pointing to the gods, drooped. Slowly. Then another. The leaves curled at the edges, brittle and dry. A small child gasped. "The baobab is crying." But no one listened. They were too busy watching Anio, dragged through dust and blood, disappearing beyond the village's edge into the scorching plain beyond. Her body left a trail of dark smears on the ground, and her silence, though deafening, now roared with consequence. The Karoo stone was still gone. But the girl who never echoed was now gone too. And the earth had begun to remember. The rope burned against Anio's scalp, each pull a jolt of fire ripping through the roots of her hair. Her head jerked back with every tug, and her body followed, scraping, sliding, skidding over sharp gravel and sun-scorched stones. The laughter and shouting of the villagers had faded behind her, swallowed by the wind and heat. No one followed. No one came to stop it. She had crossed beyond the boundary of Kamoro, where the thorn trees thinned and the sand grew pale and cruel. This was the place known in whispers as the biting skin, where no animals grazed, where even the wind hissed like warning. The old ones said it was cursed land, too close to the bones of the world. Now it was the place of her punishment. Her back dragged across jagged earth that tore her skin in ribbons. Blood soaked through the threadbare cloth of her tunic, mixing with sweat, turning her into a trail. The soles of her feet had already blistered, but now they peeled, sticking to the burning stone. Her limbs flailed helplessly behind her. Her hands clawed at the air, reaching for something that didn't exist. The sun bore down with a cruelty that felt deliberate. Her skin blistered. Her mouth filled with dust. Her eyes stung, and yet she did not scream. She had not screamed in years. Not when her parents disappeared. Not when her uncle's hand first struck her face. Not even when she was blamed, accused, and condemned. She would not scream now. But something inside her shifted. The land stretched endlessly before her, the color of white ash and dead fire. Each time her bleeding body was pulled forward, the ground underneath seemed to tremble, just faintly, like it was listening. The sand wasn't golden here, it was gray, like cooled lava, smooth in places and broken in others, as if it had once been melted and frozen in agony. With her face half buried in the dirt, Anio coughed blood and sand. Her lips cracked. Her tongue swelled. And then, without meaning to, she whispered. Not words. Just a sound. The faintest syllable of pain. The wind stopped. The rope paused, tugged slack by the one who dragged her, perhaps tired, perhaps confused. But Anio barely noticed. Her body was too broken to care about hands or faces. All she knew was the ground. The dirt. The heat. And that it was listening. She pressed her cheek against the soil. And she whispered again. This time, it was clearer. A word she hadn't spoken in years, Mama. The ground responded. Not with a voice. Not yet. But with heat. A new kind of heat, not the sun's punishing burn, but a warmth that rose from beneath, like embers stirred in an old fire. The sand beneath her began to shimmer unnaturally. The gray of it deepened to a dark, charcoal black. She blinked, dazed. Her breath rattled in her chest. The rope pulled again, jarring her forward. Her scalp tore more. Blood ran into her eyes. But she did not scream. Instead, she whispered again. Mama. Baba. Please. I don't know why they did this. The ground pulsed. Her whisper came with a tremor, faint, but unmistakable. The stones beneath her hissed. The dragger, a young man from the village, paid with 2 measures of millet, glanced down, unnerved. The rope in his hands felt hot. He squinted at the shimmering path behind him. Smoke? No. It couldn't be. He adjusted his grip and dragged her faster. The earth darkened beneath her body, as if every foot she traveled scorched memory into the land. Her blood soaked the sand, and in some places, it didn't vanish, it baked, hardened, like iron stains on stone. The more she whispered, the hotter it became. Anio's mouth moved on its own now, no longer needing thought. Her words poured out, soft and ragged. I didn't take it. I only swept. Why didn't they believe me? Why did you leave me? I want to go home. I want to vanish. I want fire. Beneath the layers of soil and rock, something stirred. A shifting in the deep. Ancient dust curled upward in tight spirals. The wind reversed. The dragging man stumbled, slipping on stones now slick with heat. He swore, glanced back, and saw her face, half buried, bleeding, lips still moving. He dropped the rope. Let her die here, he muttered, stepping back. This place isn't right. And then he ran. Fast. Back toward the village, leaving her alone in the cracked mouth of the desert. Anio didn't notice. Her eyes were half closed. Her voice never stopped. The sun had begun to lower slightly, but the heat didn't wane. In fact, it grew hotter. From under the earth came a low groan, like something old awakening. Unseen by mortal eyes, spirits began to gather. Shadows made of wind. Figures with no faces, cloaked in dust. They stood around her in silence, watching. They were her ancestors. Some bore scars like hers. Others had once been chiefs, midwives, herders, seers. All wronged. All discarded. All earthbound. One among them stepped forward. A woman with silver eyes and a braided crown of roots. She bleeds into us, the spirit said. And so we will burn into her. The earth cracked. A thin fissure opened beneath Anio, humming with heat. The wind shrieked and spun into a cyclone, throwing dust into the air. Lightning crackled in a sky with no clouds. The ground sizzled where her blood had pooled. Stone beneath her hands began to melt. And still, she whispered. And still, her ancestors watched. Injustice had bled into the earth. Now the earth would remember. The wind settled. The sun dipped low. The desert, which had howled and scorched all day, now turned eerily still, like it was holding its breath. Anio's body lay twisted in the heat-blistered dust, motionless. Her scalp, torn and bloodied, rested beside a jagged edge in the earth. Her skin was charred in places, raw in others. The whites of her eyes had turned red from sand and sun. Her lips were dry petals, cracked and still. She was not dead. But the earth thought she might be ready. A tremor, soft and almost respectful, shook the land around her. Then, without warning, the ground beneath her cracked. A single sharp crack. A slit. Then a widening. The ground opened like a wound. Anio's limp body slid into the cleft, her blood-slick limbs folding over each other as the desert swallowed her. The crevice swallowed her whole, quietly, like a secret. The split sealed itself seconds later with a soft hiss of cooling stone. The desert was silent again. Down below, darkness held her. Her body fell not fast, not in violence, but in slow descent, as if cradled by unseen hands. She drifted into the depths, deeper than roots, deeper than bones, deeper than where heat still sleeps beneath the skin of the world. When she stopped falling, there was no impact. Just a sudden stillness. Anio opened her eyes. She was no longer in the sun. The space around her was dim and cold, but faintly glowing. The light didn't come from torches or flame, it pulsed from the walls themselves, like breath. She lay at the base of a stone chamber with walls that curved upward like a hollow ribcage. Embedded in the walls were bones, not just human, but other, older things. Fossilized skulls, tusks, ribs wide as water jars. Some shimmered faintly. Some were cracked. There was no sound. No wind. Only the thump of her own heart, louder than ever. Then a whisper. You bled into us. The voice came from nowhere. Or everywhere. So we will burn into you. Anio turned her head, eyes stinging, limbs heavy. And there, at the far end of the chamber, a figure stood. She had not been there a breath ago. But now, she was unmistakable. She was tall. Barefoot. Cloaked in a garment that looked woven from lava rock and red ash. Her skin shimmered between obsidian and ember, changing with each flicker of light. Her hair flowed behind her like molten thread. Her eyes were neither kind nor cruel, just endless. I am called many names, she said. But none spoken aloud for centuries. Her voice was flame laced with stone. It rumbled and whispered at once. I was the heat beneath the birthing stone. The burn in the forge. The pain that awakened strength. Once, your people left offerings for me. Then they forgot me. Now they remember, through you. Anio tried to sit. Her muscles trembled. Her mouth still couldn't form words. But her eyes were full of questions. The red woman stepped closer. You walked through pain. You did not scream. You spoke to the earth. It heard you. I heard you. So now I ask, what do you wish to become? Anio managed to whisper. Alive. Alive is not enough. You have touched the border between suffering and silence. Few return. Fewer return with purpose. I offer you two paths. Wind, or fire. Anio frowned faintly. Wind floats. The goddess nodded. It forgets. It dances. It leaves nothing behind. And fire? The red woman smiled. Fire remembers. Fire marks. Fire changes the ground it walks upon. Anio looked down at her feet, torn, blackened, shredded. She touched them. They felt distant, like they no longer belonged to her. The pain no longer screamed. It smoldered. She raised her gaze. I choose fire. The red woman raised her hand. From her palm, flame burst, not chaotic, but deliberate. A stream of liquid heat poured through the air and touched Anio's soles. She did not scream. She did not flinch. The flames did not consume her. They wrote on her. Symbols. Old ones. Spirals and eyes and broken rings etched themselves onto her feet, glowing first red, then orange, then white hot before fading into skin. Heat crawled up her legs in ripples, like ink dropped in water. Her veins pulsed with ember light. Her breath became smoke. Her skin, though still dust-colored, now glowed faintly beneath the surface, as if lit from within. The bones in the chamber hummed. Some cracked. Others pulsed. The red woman stepped back. Her form began to blur. You will return now. But you will not beg. You will not explain. You will walk. Anio, still trembling, rose to her feet. She no longer staggered. Her body was changed. Not healed, reborn. And as she stood tall in the glowing chamber of death and memory, the stone beneath her softened. It welcomed her footsteps. The next moment, the ground above trembled once more. Anio rose. The stone split open without warning, but it did not shatter. It folded, slowly, reverently, like lips parting to release a long-held breath. From the smooth center of the earth, Anio emerged. Her body no longer limped or bled. The flesh torn days before had sealed into a stronger substance, something that was not quite skin, not quite stone. She was heat and bone, dust and fire. Her feet touched the surface first, and where they landed, the earth darkened. The sand beneath her hardened into black glass with each step, hissing as if in pain or awe. She walked forward. The wind did not rise. The air around her did not dare stir. The heat that once attacked her now moved with her, like a second presence. It shimmered at her shoulders, flickered around her fingers. Her hair, once tangled and brittle, now hung in long braids, woven through with glowing threads of ember. In them, faint sparks danced, never bursting, just glowing as if remembering flame. She did not speak. Her face was calm, unreadable. Her mouth, closed. Her eyes, steady. She walked toward Kamoro. Her path carved itself behind her. Every place her foot pressed left a blackened trail, hardened, scorched, permanent. The desert gave way beneath her, not in surrender, but in recognition. Far ahead, the village began to stir. A boy fetching water stopped mid-step and dropped his gourd. He stared at the horizon, squinting. A thin trail of smoke curled behind a walking figure. The path shimmered in the rising heat, but something about the figure was not a trick of the sun. One by one, others saw. "She's coming," someone whispered. "No. It can't be. It's her. Wasn't she?" They didn't finish the sentence. Mothers called children inside. Elders stepped out to squint into the distance, their hands shading their faces. The young men who had once laughed turned pale. Someone dropped a bowl. Another fell to his knees. And still, Anya walked. Near the edge of the village, a tethered goat screamed, broke free from its rope, and bolted into the bush. Birds rose from trees in sudden, frantic flocks. A pair of dogs crouched low to the ground as she passed, their ears flat. They did not growl. They whined. Then bowed their heads. She said nothing. The path she carved glistened behind her, a trail of scorched earth and fractured glass. It ran straight, clean, unshakable. Then the baobab stirred. The same sacred tree that had once drooped and curled, shamed by injustice, now pulsed with color. Its branches, long since brittle, straightened. Its leaves, dull for weeks, turned crimson and full. A soft rustling ran through it, like laughter held in breath. Then, without cause or season, blossoms erupted from its trunk. Red. Bright red. Like flame. The elders gasped. The baobab. It blooms again. It knows her. No one approached. No one dared. The woman they had buried in silence, the girl they had dragged in dust, had returned. But not as one of them. She was something else now, something the earth itself had made. She passed the outer huts without a glance. People drew their curtains, shut their doors, peered through cracks. Her uncle stepped outside, slow and trembling. His voice caught in his throat. The man who had given the command, "Drag her," now found his feet heavy, his mouth dry. "Anio," he whispered. "You're—" But she did not look at him. Her silence was sharper than a blade. She walked on. Dari peeked from behind a painted curtain. Her bangles no longer clinked. Her lips were pale. She stepped back into the shadows. As Anio neared the center of the village, the heat around her grew. Not unbearable, but firm. Defined. She brought warmth, but not comfort. Fire, but not destruction. Every eye that watched her saw the same truth: she was no longer of soft flesh. She was stone and heat. And her footsteps would never fade. The village had tried to forget her. Had hoped the desert would keep her. That the silence would hold. But now, the silence trembled. Anio walked through Kamoro, and the air seemed to pause for her. Doors remained shut. Curtains clung to still windows. The path she carved through the center of the village glowed faintly beneath her, footsteps scorched into permanence. Each mark on the ground hummed, like a memory refusing to die. Her uncle stumbled forward, wringing his hands, eyes wide with disbelief and growing fear. The same man who had once held her close like a daughter now stood before her like a stranger before a storm. "Anio," he breathed, voice cracking. "My child. I didn't know. They said, it was you. We had to follow the law." The elders demanded. She didn't stop walking. Please, he begged, stepping closer. You must understand. She passed him like he was smoke. Like he wasn't even there. His knees buckled. He fell, but she didn't look back. Her silence weighed more than his cries. Then came the voice that dared to rise, again. Dari. Ah, look at her now, she scoffed, standing at the mouth of her family's hut, fingers nervously twisting her necklace. You come glowing, walking like a ghost, like the desert spat you back out. So what now? You think we'll worship you? You think we'll? The ground beneath Ndari's feet gave a sharp, sudden crack. She yelped, leaping back as the earth beneath her split open just enough to show red beneath the dirt, glowing, pulsing red like veins of living fire. A sharp hiss escaped the ground, like something breathing through teeth. Ndari fell to her knees, clutching her chest, gasping. Anio never turned her head. Her gaze was locked forward. At the village center, elders who once stood tall bowed their heads. Their staffs tapped the ground in unison, like a rhythm of shame. Some whispered prayers. Others could not speak. Even children cried now, not out of fear, but because the air itself pressed into their chests like sorrow given shape. Still, she said nothing. She turned down a forgotten path, one many no longer walked. The trees leaned in. The birds were silent. Dust stirred but did not rise. At the edge of the village, hidden by wild grasses and untended stone, 2 graves lay flat against the earth. Covered in moss. Unmarked by flowers. Her parents' resting place. She knelt. The stone beneath her knees warmed. Not with the fire she carried, but with something else, something older. Familiar. Like a hand on her back when she was small. Like breath on her cheek. She pressed her palm against the grave. I found the fire, she whispered. But I did not find peace. The warmth spread under her fingers. Not forgiveness. Not absolution. But acknowledgement. She rose. Her path back to the center of Camorro carved itself again with each step, the trail growing darker, hotter. When she reached the circle where disputes were once settled, where her name was once shamed, she stopped. And spoke. Her voice cracked the silence like thunder in a dry sky. Who speaks for the silenced? She asked. No one answered. She turned slowly in a circle, her voice rising, each word forging itself into the air. Who speaks for the ones dragged? For the ones named thief, though they only swept dust? For those buried by shame not their own? She raised her hand. The wind spun like ash around her wrist. The ground does. And at that moment, from the far end of the village, a low growl echoed. Heads turned. From between 2 huts, a jackal appeared, fur streaked with soot, its mouth holding something dull and heavy. It padded into the center of the village, the elders parting for it like reeds for water. The jackal stopped before Anio. It opened its jaws. The sacred stone, the one lost, the one they claimed she had taken, dropped onto the glass-black ground with a low thud. A gasp ran through the village. The elder with the grayest beard fell to his knees. The jackal reveals truth, he whispered. Only when it's too late. Anio looked down at the stone. Then at Ndari, who now wept silently behind the crowd, her mouth trembling, eyes refusing to meet the flame-braided figure's gaze. She turned back to the people. I do not come for your forgiveness, she said. And I do not offer mine. Some wailed. Others bowed. But the ground remembers, she added. So walk carefully. And with that, she lifted the sacred stone, not to keep it, not to claim it, but to return it. She placed it gently in the hollow of the baobab, whose red blossoms shook once more, as if it sighed. Anio stood still. She had spoken. The village had listened. But she forgave no one, not even herself. The sun had not yet risen, but Camorro already glowed in red. Anio stood at the edge of the village, facing the open stretch of earth that led to the mountains. Her body no longer moved like flesh, but like something older, forged and shaped, not born. The breeze did not stir her hair. Instead, it seemed to retreat from her. With no words, no farewell, she stepped forward. And the sand beneath her heel turned to black stone. Again, and again. Her footprints laid a road of heat and ash that shimmered in the dawn light, glass-edged and permanent. The air behind her pulsed. It was not the fire that burned wood, it was the fire that marked memory, the kind that lived long after the smoke cleared. Some followed her. Not many. Just a few. An old woman with trembled breath. A young boy who once gave her water. A girl who had been called names the same way Anio had. They followed the path she carved, but the heat was alive. One man's feet blistered after a few steps. He cried out and dropped to his knees, crawling back to the village. Another collapsed as the soles of his shoes melted. But others, those who carried no cruelty, no bitter silence, no lies tucked into their tongues, walked and did not burn. It became known quickly, only the pure could walk behind her. The path she left behind cracked the rules of the world. Sand turned to stone. Grass curled to ash. Even rivers hissed when she crossed them, the water pulling away in reverence or fear. No one knew for sure. And then came the voices. Not from her lips, for she no longer needed to speak. The wind began to carry her words. Justice is not blind, it whispered, slithering into sleeping ears. It remembers. The mountains echoed her name when shouted by children. The trees seemed to lean toward her trail. In the next village, elders sat beneath their carved totems and heard the stories first from travelers. They laughed. Dismissed her as a phantom of guilt. But when the carved stone of their council hall cracked in the middle of the night, with no tremor, no quake, they began to listen. Within days, the first carving appeared on a village gate, a figure with glowing feet and braided flame for hair. No face, only eyes burning behind hollow bone. In another town, a woman who had buried her daughter for fear of shame left a cracked bowl of water at the edge of the scorched trail. The bowl steamed. The water vanished. And still, Anio walked. She did not stop for rest. She did not hunger. She no longer spoke to those who knelt before her. Not out of cruelty, but because she had transcended the world they still moved in. Soon, a law spread, not written by kings, but carved into homes by trembling hands. Never drag the innocent. The earth watches. In marketplaces, gossip turned into warnings. If you lie on someone's name, walk only on stone. If your hands are clean, you'll feel only warmth. If not, blister. If you see her and she doesn't look at you, ask what you buried. And among those whispers bloomed a new name. The girl who burned without flame. No one knew where it had started. Some said it came from a desert shrine built from melted glass. Others claimed a goat herder shouted it as he staggered away from a trail that turned his staff to cinder. But the name spread. Children whispered it into cracks in the wall. Wives murmured it while sweeping ashes. Men said it when they dared not confess. The girl who burned without flame, the one whose silence set villages ablaze. Eventually, she reached the base of the mountains. There, the path ended. She walked into the high rocks as though they parted for her, though no one else could find where. Birds stopped circling. Wind died. Even the clouds seemed to hold their breath. And she was gone. But the path remained. No rain erased it. No winds covered it. Blackened stones snaked from Camoro to the edge of the world. Every village it touched told a story. Some wept. Some sang. Some built shrines, others burned them. But none denied her. And when people did wrong, the cruel, the cowardly, the ones who twisted truth to survive, they'd wake in the middle of the night and feel heat beneath their feet. Or hear the faint echo of her voice. Justice is not blind. It remembers. They say she walks still, somewhere far beyond the mountains. Alone. Always alone. Not because she cannot return. But because she knows the world she left behind is not ready for the weight of her forgiveness. And because myths do not rest. They burn quietly, in the places we least expect. Waiting. Listening. Becoming legend. The city of Naran stood like a gleaming scar on the edge of the great desert, built from stone dragged from the mountains and polished until it reflected the sun like water. Its towers pierced the sky, its gates carved with gods who no longer listened. It was said that its palace floor was made from crushed bones of 1,000 defeated enemies, powdered into marble to remind the people who ruled. But under that shining beauty was rot. The poor starved beneath silver balconies. Orphans swept gold-flecked streets while nobles sipped wine laced with perfume. Women disappeared when they spoke too loud. Boys vanished when they refused silence. The city's priests spoke of gods, but only ever in defense of power. And then, one morning, without cause or wind, the marble cracked. Just a thin, quiet line across the palace hall where kings held court. Servants were blamed. A girl whipped. Then another. Then another. The line deepened. On the 4th day, the sky grew dark without clouds. On the 5th, the ground beneath the main gate turned black. By the 6th, word spread, a barefoot figure was walking through the desert. She made no announcement. Carried no weapon. Wore no crown. But her feet burned the dust into glass, and her steps echoed like a drumbeat from the bones of the world. The guards who stood at the city gate lowered their spears. Not in welcome, but in fear. She entered. The people stared from windows and rooftops. Mothers pulled children away from the streets. Merchants left their wares and fled. Her path was silent except for the hiss of stone hardening beneath her. Each footstep echoed twice, once in the street, and once in the hearts of those who had reason to fear her. At the palace gates, the king stood flanked by robed priests and sweating guards. Gold chains wrapped his wrists. A crown of rubies glistened on his brow. He opened his arms as if to embrace her. "We have heard your name," he declared. "We welcome your power. Take our gold. Take a shrine. We offer a statue in your honor." Enyo said nothing. Her eyes swept across the marble steps. Then she walked forward. And the palace floor, silent for centuries, groaned. A loud crack split the space beneath the king's throne. The tiles webbed with fault lines that glowed faintly red. The ruby crown trembled. A priest screamed. The guards backed away, clutching their blades as though they might melt in their hands. She passed them all. Still silent. Still walking. Then from the side corridor, a figure emerged. A girl. Young. Thin. No older than Anio had been when she was dragged. She had bruises along her ankles. Burn marks hidden beneath her tunic. Eyes sunken with hunger. A cloth clenched in her hands. She had seen many powerful people come and go. But this woman, this burning shadow, was different. And still, the girl stepped forward. She followed. At first, just one footstep. Then another. She moved onto the scorched path behind Anio, expecting to blister, to fall, to fail. But the heat didn't harm her. The flames curled around her feet like recognition. She took another step. Anio turned, just slightly. Her face was unreadable. But her eyes softened, only slightly, as if acknowledging something fragile and blooming. The girl said nothing. And neither did Anio. But in that silence, a lesson passed. Fire teaches those who walk through it willingly. That day, the marble floors of the palace split into shards. The throne crumbled. The king fled, barefoot, stepping into his own judgment. And the city of Naran remembered the name that wind carried. The girl who burned without flame. But now, she was not alone. The girl with bruised feet became her first student. Others would follow. For justice no longer wore a crown. It walked barefoot. And it remembered. In the years that followed, Anio's name became a whisper stitched into the wind, carried across forests, plains, deserts, and rivers. No longer was she just the girl dragged across the hot ground. She was something more now. Something elemental. Something that lived beneath the ground. Her footsteps had hardened stone and shattered thrones, but they had also carved something deeper, a memory the land itself refused to forget. In the copper-dusted markets of the northern savannas, griots and old women bent with age would gather under awnings to tell her story. They spoke of the girl whose silence once shook a village. They said her feet turned to fire not by curse, but by truth. They said she walked alone, not because she had no home, but because the world was her witness. Children leaned in wide-eyed, their hands tucked beneath their chins, lips slightly parted as they waited for the storyteller's voice to drop, just a notch. And when they dragged her, the griots would say, the earth did not forget. It carved her name beneath every stone. Some added that the trees, once witnesses to her pain, now grow red leaves where she has passed. In the coastal villages, where wind spoke through palm trees and waves whispered against canoes, mothers began to whisper her name as lullabies. Not in fear, but in reverence. Walk kindly, they'd murmur, brushing ash behind a child's ears, the stones may remember your name. In highland towns where the wind turned cold and sharp, villagers crafted footpaths from cool clay, soft to the soul, unoffensive to the land. At the edge of each path, they carved a spiral, the sigil of flame in motion. The spiral of Anio. It marked respect. Remembrance. A promise never to drag the innocent again. Elders told stories of her judgment. That sometimes, when injustice lingered too long and silence thickened like smoke, footsteps would begin to burn again, right in the center of the village square. And no one ever saw who walked them. But the trail would be there in the morning, blackened stone, ash-curled grass, and red leaves gathered in a circle, even if there were no trees nearby. Some dismissed these tales. Said they were children's stories. But those who carried secrets, those who had once shouted when they should have listened, or struck when they should have sheltered, those people feared even the crackle of a cooking fire. Because they knew, flame remembers. In a dusty village near the river Suja, a merchant once tried to marry off a weeping girl for 10 goats. That night, his compound caught fire, but nothing burned. Not a wall, not a tree. Just one thing, his sandals. Blackened as though he'd walked across stone left in the sun. He left the next morning without a word. No one saw him again. In the desert city of Tirans, a judge known for silencing women found red leaves scattered in his chambers, despite not a single tree within miles. He tried to laugh. Then scream. But no sound left his lips for days. He retired early. Elsewhere, in lands where Anio's name had once never reached, barefoot girls began to appear in carvings. Murals painted them in trailing cloths, walking past mountains that bowed, rivers that split, cities that stilled. And at the bottom of those paintings, one sentence always appeared. You may bury a girl in silence, but her footsteps will speak. Across the continent, her legend shifted. She was not just a myth of vengeance anymore. She became a warning. A protector. A symbol of what happens when pain is buried too deep, and what rises when the earth refuses to keep it hidden. Young girls now traced her spiral symbol into the dirt with their toes before being married, not for luck, but for courage. In times of mourning, some communities began to walk barefoot for 7 days, to honor the flame, to remember the silence, to feel the heat of every step. In distant highland caves, a shrine appeared. No one built it. No one claimed it. Just a circle of red leaves around a stone where travelers said they felt warmth even at midnight. People came to leave gifts, cracked mirrors, torn braids, bundles of cloth scorched at the edge. And always, footprints. No one ever saw them form. But they were there, pressed into stone, never fading. Some say Anio still walks. Others say she became the flame. But all agree, she never disappeared. She became the voice beneath the earth, the one that speaks not through sound, but through fire, footsteps, and the unfading memory of injustice. Her pain shaped the land itself. And now the land carries her story, one step at a time. The desert stretched out before her like an ocean of silence, waves of heat curling off sand that shimmered like molten glass. The pilgrim girl stumbled, barefoot and shaking, every step biting into her torn soles. Blisters burst. Blood welled and dried in lines down her ankles. Still, she walked. Behind her, a village that no longer wanted her. A missing bracelet. A false whisper. A crowd too quick to believe. She had run with nothing but the thin robe on her back and the shame pressed into her spine like a brand. Her name was no longer hers, it had been stripped, spat on, silenced. By dusk, her knees trembled with every step. The sky bled orange behind her, and the wind no longer offered even the mercy of dust. Her lips cracked. Her eyes stung. Still, she did not cry. Not yet. Crying was something girls who were believed could afford. She collapsed once. Then again. But on the third time, as her palms kissed the sand and she prepared to let the desert take her, she saw it. A path. A strange one, burned into the ground itself. Not a trail of wagon wheels or animal prints. This was smooth, blackened stone, cutting through the desert like a scar. As though the sand had once caught fire and never recovered. As though something had walked here and left fire behind. She stared. Then rose. And stepped onto it. Instantly, her feet stopped burning. She blinked. Looked down. The stone was warm. But not cruel. It was solid, and for the first time since fleeing, she felt something beneath her that didn't want to hurt. She followed. The wind grew gentler. The stars blinked awake. And the hush of the desert shifted, not silence anymore, but a sound. Barely there. Like breath. Like footsteps buried under stone. She did not speak. Only walked. And when night swallowed the sky whole, she laid her aching body upon the path and slept. In the morning, the sun rose shyly. The girl stirred, then gasped softly. All around her, red leaves. Dozens of them. Fluttering gently even though no trees stood for miles. She sat up. The air felt different, as if something remembered her. As if the silence itself was holding her. Then came the hum. Low. Steady. Like breath beneath her bones. Like a promise, you are not alone. She turned her head. Far ahead, at the edge of the blackened trail, was a figure. A woman. Barefoot. Cloth trailing behind her like smoke. Her pace was slow, but sure, every step pressing into the ground with purpose, with memory. The pilgrim girl watched her move toward the horizon, where sky met earth. The woman didn't turn back. She didn't have to. Because in that moment, the girl understood. She was not following someone else's path. She was invited. She rose again, less broken, more whole. The red leaves swirled at her ankles. The hum beneath her feet pulsed, not just a sound now, but a rhythm. A memory. A name. Anio. Not just a girl. Not just a legend. But every silenced soul that had ever blistered alone, every scream that had ever been dragged across hot ground, every step that had ever been punished for walking too loudly. Anio was pain turned into power. And now, her path burned still, not to hurt, but to remind. As the pilgrim girl took her first step forward, something shifted within her. The shame slid from her shoulders. The silence uncurled in her throat. And though no words escaped her lips, her breath carried a truth that would never again be taken. I am not what they said I was. Behind her, the sand lay quiet. Before her, the stone waited. And somewhere ahead, the flame walked, slow, eternal, unafraid. Because the ground remembers. And in remembering, it lights the way.